Lewis, hello, my friend. Hang on. Got my radio face on, and I'll keep it on.
First and foremost, let's start with the question, especially coming off the crazy year we've all been coming off. How are you?
Doing fantastic. I live in Nashville, so we have been affected, obviously, the music industry, and you're in the music business as well. It's really devastated, the touring side of it. But, all in all, in the wrestling industry, I'm a third generation promoter. My grandmother got it back into the business back in the 1940s. And I've always known that, we're in sports, we don't really have a season, and we're not a television show strictly that's just a season. We're 52 weeks a year. So we've always had somewhat of a Teflon toughness to us as our form of the hybrid of sports entertainment. But going through the pandemic and being able to produce the content, without an audience and done virtually in the Thunderdome, in Tampa and in Florida and other, all the different other brands of wrestling have found out and figured out a way to persevere through this. So it's pretty rewarding to be a part of the industry. But personally, I'm doing great. And I'll tell you one thing. In a lot of ways, had the pandemic not come along, I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you. And the reason I say that is we're here to promote, my world with Jeff Jarrett, the podcast. And in a lot of ways, Lewis, it sort of came out of the pandemic.
That's, you know what? I remember, and I was dying to check it out. And it's funny that you mentioned your grandmother, because I credit my late grandmother, God rest her soul, for getting me into wrestling, because when I was a little kid, she would watch it all the time. And the reason being is my uncle wanted to see like a house show or something, and lied to my grandmother and told her they were taking her to see ice skating. And instead of ice skating, it was pro wrestling, which she 1000% got into. And like, I would come over and she would, oh my God, Hulk Hogan's going to get killed. And it took me a while when I was younger. I was like, well, wow, maybe he will. And then you grow up and you kind of realize how the business works. And you go, don't worry, Grandma, he's not going to die. I'm pretty sure that, we're safe on that front. But she would watch it religiously. And when I was in high school and college during the Monday Night Wars, when she was still alive, like, she was fired up to watch Nitro in WWE, which was crazy because she learned how to drink wine and would sit and watch wrestling. So
I don't know.
Way to bond.
I was going to say, I don't know if she learned how to drink wine, but that's a whole nother podcast or a whole nother interview. but no, it's something that's really unique in a lot of ways about our industry, that we're, when I say a 3-generational form of entertainment, you sort of hit the nail on the head. Your grandmother, she lived it, breathed it, eat it, sleep it. And look, I grew up in the house of a promoter, and back in the day, the business was just different. It was protected, quote unquote. And there was that, to this day, people are not real sure how we do the magic trick. They think they know, but then once they sort of dive into it a little bit deeper, they find out they really don't know, but they think they know. But in the end of the day, it's a great water cooler discussion, if you will. But that's what's so unique about, wrestling podcasts are very, very successful in general in the podcast world. And so, we just launched this week, and my first topic is an event that happened in 1999, and the fan response and the download response, I'll say, has just been overwhelming. But that's it. It's like you and your grandmother bonded over it. You talked about it. You got to an age and you say, hey, Grandma, back off the wine, and I promise you Hulk will survive. But no, it's a cool story, but it's a memory that you're talking about to this day. And I know that is something that professional wrestling has always done. It's connected a father, son, a grandma, grandson, an uncle. It's something, it's a form of entertainment. Like I said, 52 weeks a year that it's there for you. And during COVID and pandemic, it's like sports went away and some of our television shows went away. And look, you're in the industry that you probably had to work remotely. So that just everything has radically changed. but good old professional wrestling has been there through it all.
I'll tell you what, I was excited to watch, and I'm curious to get your vibe on it in a few, but when I found out that the show must go on, so to speak, and WWE was going to do their thing, I wanted to see how they were going to do it because, I mean, you know better than anyone, that business is designed around the pop and the reaction from the fans. And before they did the Thunderdome, it felt like watching a dress rehearsal for a while. It was just really weird. Like the whole sound of everything changed. And I mean, WWE, hands down, they have one of the best production teams in any form of television. But even they couldn't take away from the fact there was nobody in there. And that was weird to watch for the first couple of weeks that they were doing it that way.
And it's funny how you know, they say 70% of all communication is nonverbal. And when you really let that sink in, just how humans interact with one another. But when we're watching those bumps and moves and guys going over the top rope and the promos and all that, but without any sound, you just sort of said it. Okay, that's different. And not a lot of folks were fans of it. We persevered through it to get us to the Thunderdome, to get us to the virtual environment. So it was the necessity. But you're right. Our business is a lot of ways Shakespeare to the masses. It's that improv. It's got such a hybrid form of, obviously it's not true sport, but there's so much physicality to it. And it's not just, you know, a blockbuster movie film or a television show or a comedy. It's just really the hybrid form of entertainment. But so much of it is that, I'll call it that physical ballet or physical soap opera, if you will, but it's played out right in front of everybody's eyes. And, you know, through the years, you hear, oh, these guys are larger than life. In a lot of ways, that's the nature of the beast, that you watch us on TV, but you also know in 3 months you can come down to, you know, Conseco Fieldhouse. Is it still called Conseco? No. The arena. Whatever. What's the Indianapolis ball arena called?
It's Bankers Life.
But see, look, it changes. I'm dating myself. But anyway, but you know, come down to your local event, if you will, arena, and be able to see it live. That's one of the things that you don't really think about. Back in the day, again, I'll date myself, Peyton Manning. Yeah, you could go see him, but he's still on the field and got a helmet on. And so that's how, but being able to go down and get an autograph or see, and then, you know, nowadays interact on social media, it's just a whole different world. But our business, it really is a connector on so many levels.
I was excited to hear that you were doing a podcast because I'm a fan of, you know, the podcast, especially when it comes to wrestling podcasts, because there are so many stories and you guys have all lived these interesting lives that the majority of people don't get to experience just by the nature of the business. And I love hearing from the guys who have been through some stuff, and God knows you've been through some stuff just over the course of different careers, different organizations, being a promoter yourself and kind of doing it from a bunch of different levels. It's really cool to hear like the inside of that, because a lot of the stuff you never know when you watch it as just a spectator. You don't realize, you know, I guess the behind the curtain type deal.
And that's something that Conrad Thompson, my co-host, and he's got it's basically an incredible, I don't call it a team, it's a faction because it's in the world of professional wrestling. But, you know, there's 5 Hall of Famers and Bruce Pritchard and Tony Schiavone. Collectively, there's 7 of us. But Conrad has been after me a couple of years to do this podcast, and I just never had any interest in looking in the rearview mirror. I'm a promoter. You know, I'm a talent first and foremost through the years. And I've always, what's my next match? What's the next big pay-per-view? And just always look forward. But he's like, trust me, Jeff, go back and tell these stories. And just last month, April, was my 35th year in the industry. So you said it, there's been ups, downs, good, bad, and the ugly that we're going to dig into. And, you know, coming off, like I said earlier, our very first episode this week, man, we dug into it. And the response has been great, but just telling those stories, and I've said this story a couple of times, the one of the things that really resonated with me during the pandemic was watching The Last Dance and Michael Jordan. And when Jordan, I'm a basketball junkie, so I fit right into the great state of Indiana. But I'm a basketball junkie. But watching him go back in time and have that laptop and then look up at the camera, that was so compelling and riveting that it made me open my eyes that, okay, maybe if I do go back in my history and tell a story, and obviously 20 years later, there's a lot that's transpired since the story happened. But man, it excites me to go in and really tell the people or let them connect to the story behind the story. That's what I have found that people are so engaged in, that, oh, okay, that connected that dot, that connected that dot. Now that makes sense. And that's pretty cool to see. And at the end of the day, look, you're a personality, you're an on-air personality. It's all about entertainment. If it's not compelling entertainment, whether we're talking for 2 minutes or 2 hours, you got to be compelling. And so podcasting has now fallen into that genre of, it's entertainment, whether it's Netflix and the Tiger King or Last Dance or Seinfeld or the Ozark or whatever. On-demand entertainment is where things are at today. And I feel pretty excited about getting into that genre of podcasting.
Awesome. I got to ask the question before we're up against the clock, so to speak. But where did slap nuts come from?
Oh, Lewis, I could give you a long-winded story, but the short story is my grandmother, the wrestling promoter, used to call people slappies, and slappies were people that they knew more and more about less and less, and all they did was slap their gums together all day. So in the Attitude Era, I attached nuts. So there we have it. Me and you, Lewis, in 2021, May 5th, we're talking about slap nuts.
I'm excited to hear the more that you have to talk about with Conrad Thompson on your podcast. Obviously, we'll leave all the supporting links here on this so you can find it. But what's the best way to listen?
Real quick, anywhere you listen to podcasts, just download it. It's My World with Jeff Jarrett, and that's JEFFJARRETT. My World with Jeff Jarrett. All my socials are at Real Jeff Jarrett, and we launched a website to go along with it, realjeffjarrett.com. And it will give you everything you need to know. That's all you really got to remember, realjeffjarrett.com.
Awesome. And we'll put links to all of that at 939xp.com so everybody can go check out the podcast. Dude, thank you so much for taking the time out. It's always good to hear stories from guys who have lived it, so to speak. So looking forward to listening to more of the podcast and having you as part of the Westwood One family, man. That's awesome.
In the family, brother. Lewis, we're kin now.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Always, man. Jeff Jarrett, all the best to you, buddy.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave.